What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel, this time for the Sony Open. In this video, we'll discuss how important course history is at this particular venue. We will discuss how the odds are moving throughout the betting market, what they're telling us, and how we should use them in our DFS lineups. We'll discuss some ownership, high owned plays, and then, of course, we'll finish off with the tournament winning low owned plays. Welcome. I am Brian Jester, co founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. And we will start with this event, the Sony Open. Now, if you played last week, the Century, you know that it was a no cut event, smaller field. We are back to a normal event this week, so 140 plus golfers. There is a cut, so we're back to our typical strategies that we outline in our daily plug and in our videos that we discussed last year. Now, this course is interesting. If you remember last week's video, if you watched last week's video, if you read our daily plug last week, you know that we mentioned playing in November or December or playing at that course before last week was important in figuring out who would perform well at that course. This course is even more important. Now, if you look at all the courses that are on the PGA Tour and in the majors that are played pretty consistently, this course here is the #2 most predictive course in terms of course history and how it impacts a golfer's performance in future years at this course, both number of years of experience as well as how they've played there. #1 is Augusta, but goes to show that this is not a course that you can just go first time and dominate the course. Ludwig Aubert, who top of the board this week in salary, obviously a very promising young player, an incredible golfer, couldn't figure it out last week. It was one of those courses where you needed to play there before to learn the intricacies of how to play it. Same goes for this course this week. So really, we are looking for guys who have played here before. Played last week is a big boost as well. Knock the rust off. But again, we're looking for guys who have played this course before. That will be really important, especially in our low risk and our smaller field lineups. Now, in larger contests, we can take some shots on guys who had never played here before or didn't play last week. But again, there is success determined here by how often you've played at this particular course. The other thing we should discuss here is the weather. Now, for whatever reason, I can't pull it up on my end, but if you look at Wind Finder, the link is in our daily plug. That link is in the description below. The wind is likely going to play a factor this week. It did not play a factor last week, but if you look at the wind on Thursday and you look at the wind on Friday, there is likely some sort of wave advantage that is going to materialize. Now, if you haven't played a ton of PGA DFS, you just forgot from last year, wave advantages essentially are, if you look at the golfers' tee times for this event, you have golfers that tee off Thursday morning, and then golfers that tee off Thursday afternoon, and then they flip on Friday. The ones who teed off Thursday afternoon tee off Friday morning, vice versa for the Thursday morning, Friday afternoon guys. And if the wind is worse in one of those waves, you can open up an advantage where if you play all golfers or most golfers, especially the cheaper golfers, from one wave where there is not a lot of wind, they could gain up to a stroke, even 2 strokes on the field, giving them a pretty big leg up heading into the weekend, a pretty big jump on making the cut, which obviously is important if we can get 6 out of 6 golfers to make the cut. Now, right now, it looks like there is a slight edge for Thursday morning golfers, but I'm recording this 10 a.m. Eastern. We are still over 24 hours out before the event starts. My advice, check the wind forecast tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, and determine if there is going to be a wave advantage. You can just look at the wind gust, wind speeds, the various time slots, and see if any of them match up. Now, if the wind is going to be gusty both days, there still is an edge if you're playing multiple lineups in stacking some of your lineups one way or the other. That way, if a wave advantage does materialize and we can't predict it ahead of time, you're even more ahead of the field. There's a great anecdote from, I believe it was the Players Championship 2 years ago, where everyone thought the one wave would have a massive advantage, but there was a little bit of delay, the winds flipped, and the other wave, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, whichever it was, ended up having a huge boost. Tons of those guys made the cut. They picked up multiple strokes on the field, and a very small fraction of the DFS contest field stacked that wave. So there's always, if there's going to be weather of any sort, there is always a reason to stack some of your lineups. with all golfers, or at least the cheaper part of your golfers from one wave, and then maybe another subset from the other wave. Now, I say cheaper golfers because obviously the better golfers, the more skilled golfers aren't as impacted. Their scores aren't as fragile when it comes to weather conditions. Yes, they're going to be affected, but maybe not necessarily as much as a guy who needs some help near the bottom of the salary table or the odds board. So just something to keep in mind. Again, we don't have concrete information just yet, but let's monitor throughout the next 24 hours. All right, let's talk about some odds now. Let's talk about some betting markets, see what they are telling us for this event. Don't worry, still need the water sip during the golf videos as well. I'm going to pull up my notes here. And let's talk about golfers who are going to be popular because they are technically underpriced. Again, I mentioned in last week's video, the best way to look at this is pull up our Occupy model at occupyfantasy.com that ranks every golfer for FanDuel and DraftKings, sort by DraftKings salary or FanDuel salary, and just look at their odds to win. Whoever's odds to win stands out, as in it is lower than the guys priced around them, they are typically going to be popular in DFS. So I'll do this for DraftKings and FanDuel right now. These are guys who are they are actually underpriced based on their odds to win, and we expect them to be either popular or see a boost in ownership. So here are the guys for DraftKings, and we'll start from the top down. We have Brian Harmon at $9,900. We have Russell Henley at $9,600. We have JT Poston at $9,100. Benny On at $8,700. We have Denny McCarthy, $8,400. We have Harris English, $8,300. We have Brendan Todd, $7,900. Adam Svensson, $7,700. And we're going to keep scrolling here because there's one more guy who sticks out a little bit. Am I just going to have to type his name in? I might have to. Let's do it. Ben Coles at $7K. Yes, Ben Coles, $7K. So these are the guys that we expect to be more popular than you would think. One common thread among most of these guys outside of Cole, these guys played last week. Remember I said at the top of the video, playing last week is always a boost in this event. So a lot of these guys did play last week. Now if we go over to FanDuel and we look at, now someone in our comments, actually multiple people in our comments on the video last week asked me to do this exercise for FanDuel, and I said we can still do this exercise. It's just not as important because the pricing is softer and the odds to win aren't necessarily more impactful on golfers' ownership here. But either way, these are golfers that are underpriced for their odds. Let's scroll down. We got Corey Connors. We got Chris Kirk, who won last week. We have JT Poston here as well at $10,400. Sahith Theegala, $10,300. Siwoo Kim, $9,900. Harris English, let's keep scrolling. He is $9,700. And then we have Keegan Bradley, who is $9,300. So those are your guys who are underpriced. And there are a few more towards the bottom of the salary board on FanDuel as well, but we don't expect any of them to get over 10% owned in the largest contest. But those are the guys just to keep in mind on FanDuel that are underpriced. Now, there are two more guys I do want to mention here that if you look at our projected ownership, which we take a lot of pride in being accurate with our projected ownership in PGA DFS. It's in our Occupy model. It's in our lineup builder. And you may look, and there are two guys who you'll look at their ownership in the model, and then you'll open your small field GPPs, your cash games on Thursday after lock, and you'll say, wow, these guys are a lot higher owned than Occupy projected. Two guys stick out because of their industry projections, because of industry sentiments. We expect these guys to be a little bit higher owned, especially in smaller contests than our ownership indicates on DraftKings. The first one is Aaron Rai, who industry projections have a little higher than the guys around him at $7,500. And next we have Siwoo Kim, who we mentioned as underpriced on FanDuel, but he is underpriced based on industry projections on DraftKings at $8,600. We expect him to be a little more popular in smaller contests. So just keep that in mind as you're building. You don't want to build a lineup unless you're playing cash games, a lineup of 6 of these guys since they'll all be very popular. But just be sure to mix and match them into your lineups and not overload too many of them into any one lineup. All right. Now, if you followed last week's video, if you were in our Discord server, if you watched these videos last year, if you're a part of Occupy Fantasy last year, you know what our Trifecta Plays are. Essentially, we monitor 3 or 4, depending on the week, sportsbooks who we consider sharp. They take a lot of sharp golf action throughout the week, and we monitor the odds to win for every golfer at these sharp sportsbooks. And if a golfer's odds to win improve at every single sharp sportsbook, we call that a Trifecta Play. Now, this makes a ton of common sense, right? If a golfer's odds to win improve at every sportsbook, that should raise some eyebrows. Clearly, different groups, different books. I realize that this golfer's odds to win are better than they initially put out in their lines. One guy makes the cut this week. It is Denny McCarthy, $8,400. Now, every sharp sportsbook that we looked at moved his odds to win. Now, he is going to be popular, as I said a few minutes ago, but a guy that I would expect to build lineups around based on how his odds have been moving at sharp sportsbooks. If you remember last week, I didn't say it in the video because, as I said, these trifecta plays changed throughout the day. And I put the final trifecta plays last Thursday morning in our Discord server. Sahith Theegala was on that list, as was Xander Schauffele, top 10. And yeah, you probably needed to have, especially Theegala, if you wanted to win the larger contest. Theegala was on that list. This list produced a lot of winners, a lot of top fives, a lot of top 10s, oftentimes at lower ownership, like Theegala was last week. So it's something to keep in mind. And it's really important to be in our Discord server to get the final list before the lineups lock on Thursday, early afternoon, noon Eastern. So Denny McCarthy's the one guy this week. We expect a couple more names to join the list throughout the day and tomorrow morning. So again, be sure to follow back. All right. Speaking of this ownership, just a couple guys. I ran some early lineups this morning. I put 300 lineups into our lineup builder, put in some rules based on what we like to do for large field GPPs. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that this is how my exposures are going to shake out for the week, but chalkier guys over 15% projected ownership that I didn't get as much of the field, or I was way underweight, or ended up getting 0% of in my 300 lineups with our large field rules in place. Guys that I was looking at, Brian Harman, I didn't have a ton of. And it makes sense, right? If he's going to be super popular and there are other guys in this price range. Brian Harman, Brendan Todd, I wasn't getting a lot of. Andrew Putnam, who we expect to be popular. Let's find him here. I think he's 7,500. Yes. Putnam, we expect to be popular. I wasn't getting a ton of him. Harris English at 8,300. And Adam Hadwin at 8K. Now, if you remember last week in the video, I discussed that typically we want to play the more popular guys in the 9 to 10K range. 8K range is okay. And then once we get into the 7K range, we start to see performance drop off, and you can get a really big edge in the largest GPPs by fading or not playing the popular golfers in the 6 and 7K range. So it's no surprise that a lot of these guys that are popular in this range ended up on my underweight list when I ran lineups this morning. But again, that is something to keep in mind as you're building large field lineups for this tournament. And again, the Occupy model, we update ownership a few times per day. Make sure you check back for the final ownership updates to figure out which golfers are going to be the most popular for this event. I also think you can be underweight on the top 3 guys. You look at Aubert, hasn't played this course. Hatton, same. Fitzpatrick. These guys are going to be relatively popular. Hatton might be under 15%, but Aubert and Fitzpatrick we expect to be over 15%. And this was justified to me when I looked at the sharp sportsbook moves this morning. And there are a ton of moves. I'm talking 25 plus golfers at all 3 books that we track. What this tells me is that it is a wide open event. Anyone can win it, and that there is some fragility to the guys at the top of the odds and the top of their chances to win. So when we have a wide open leaderboard, it allows us to build more balanced lineups. It allows us to take more shots, and really makes it a perfect GPP week. Unlike last week where no cut events are really difficult for really any type of contest, this is the perfect type of week for large field GPPs. And when we have these non-elevated events, these regular events, and the fields are softer, not as strong, that's really when the best weeks are for GPPs. So maybe if you're a GPP player, maybe up your allocation a bit this week. Finally, we'll close out the show with, I'll name 5 guys that I think we should consider strongly for the largest GPPs, even for some small field GPPs that are under 5%. I'm talking 90, 95, 99% of GPP winners over the past 5 years in PGA DFS for these cut events, these regular events. They have featured a golfer under 5% owned in their winning lineup. Now, you may say, which one do I pick? There are a lot of sub 5% golfers. Yes, really the key point here is that every large field lineup that you build should include some sort of under 5% owned, maybe 2, depending on the week. But you have to have them. And yes, it's going to feel risky, but you have to take risks to win the largest GPPs. So here are 5 guys that are standing out to me for a variety of reasons that are under 5% owned or close to it that I think we should be using heavily in our large field lineups. First one is Lucas Glover. Played last week, so he gets that bump. Played here before, gets that bump as well. 5% projected ownership. He's the #1 ranked golfer in our model this week. Our eyes should always perk up when we see a low-owned golfer at the top of our Occupy model. 5% owned for Lucas Glover. Next, we have Mark Hubbard, who, and this is definitely a large field play only. Didn't play last week, has not had great success at this course in the past, but is this his top 5 in our model, and we have him for 2% projected ownership. So not a guy you're going to play in cash games, not a guy you're probably not even going to play in small field GPPs, but for the largest contest, our model really likes Hubbard this week, despite the situational factors that are against him. Next, we have Chad Ramey, who we have for 1% projected ownership. Not a trifecta play just yet, but his odds to win have improved at 2 different sharp sportsbooks that we track. $6,500 at 1% ownership. Definitely someone we want to consider. Next, we have Grayson Sigg in the very same vein as Chad Ramey. $6,700. He has had his odds to win improve at multiple sharp sportsbooks. Not quite a trifecta play. Maybe these guys will get there later this evening. We'll monitor. But Sigg at 2%, Ramey at 1%. Both guys in the 6K range that at least multiple books are respecting action for these guys. And finally, we have Ben Martin, who also has 2 sharp sportsbook odds moves in his favor. He is $6,300, so will allow you to fit 1 extra expensive golfer into your lineup. He is 1% projected ownership, and he has a lot of cuts made at this course. Again, talk about course history being important here. The #2 most predictive course on the PGA Tour. And when we have a guy that's made all but 1 cut in double-digit times at this course, it makes sense why Ben Martin is getting some love in the betting markets. It makes sense why we should consider him at just 1% ownership for our large field GPP lineup. So that's it. That's a lot to digest, I know. So what you can do is make sure you read our daily plug, occupyfantasy.com. Our writer, Niramata, who is a top PGA DFS player, gives his favorite plays, gives lineup construction tips, and really templated advice on how to approach different contest types on both DraftKings and FanDuel. So make sure you read that every single week. It's important because it allows you to take all the information I give you here, what our model says, and really create the optimal lineups based on what we know from historical data, depending on how large the contest is and how the payout structure is, and that is in our daily plug. Our Occupy model, I've referenced several times, ranks every golfer, FanDuel, and DraftKings with projected ownership that is updated multiple times before the event starts, odds moves. And then our Discord server, you want to check out, I'll post the Trifecta Plays in there tomorrow morning. And our lineup builder, which is especially helpful because you can take those rules from the daily plug, input them into the lineup builder, run your lineups, and now you have 150, 300 optimal lineups. And even if you only build a couple lineups, even when I do this and I have just a couple lineups, I'll build 300 and pick some of the top ranked ones. And now you can see what the best way is to fit all those pieces together. So all the links for that is in the description below. If you like this video, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It is free to do so. Just click subscribe right below the video and you'll get notified whenever we go live, whenever this video is posted every week for PGA DFS. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. That lets us know to continue making these videos every week. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to get opinions, drop a comment below. I will happily get back to you before the event starts. So, Brian Jester for Occupy Fantasy, thank you for listening and good luck at the Sony Open.